they're all eagerly waiting those results because they put their blood, sweat, and tears into that delivery. Also, the global project team at the compound level is really waiting for those results, because if the results are positive, it means they're going to have to try and register and submit moving forward. Senior management are also really excited. The board is really excited. Shareholders are eagerly awaiting. Even the CEO is eagerly awaiting and having sleepless nights for the results. But above all, the patients, especially patients for unmet medical need, or met medical need, where it's just not doing what it needs to do for the patient, are eagerly waiting, and the families and friends that love and care about them are waiting for those results. But the first person across that whole process to understand if the drug works or not is the statistical programmer, or perhaps the biostatistician, depending on your operating model. And that's an incredible privilege if you just take a step back and think about that. So if you think about, as a statistical programmer, you've generated this analysis, you're looking at this report, and it's telling you that you've got something magical there that's making a difference to real people's lives. So I think we're part of a very inspiring, engaging, and noble profession. We should be proud of that. I think we're all going to have a good time in Goa. But when you go back to your desk on Monday and you're into the more routine job, have an extra bounce in your step, put your head up, stick your chest out, and be proud that you are a statistical programmer. So in essence, it's cool to be a statistical programmer, and I think it's going to get cooler as we move forward. Okay, so I better get on with the presentation itself, which is about pioneering disruptive transformation in statistical programming, past, present, and future. And actually, just before I start, I wanted to ask the audience, or a few people to shout out, which is always a risk, because no one might shout, but to ask the audience, why do you think it's important that we have to continually innovate and adapt in the pharma industry? Any ideas about why we do that?
Reduce the cost.
Reduce the cost, absolutely. Any other ideas?
Reduce the time.
Reduce the time, speed, cost. Anything else?
Make things efficient and
Exactly, make things efficient. So all of those things, and I would just simply summarize it as it's really important that we must improve upon met medical need. We must deliver against unmet medical need. We must broaden access, and we must create a healthier world. And we've made some great progress there. And you know, if you think about the introduction of medicines and the impact they've had over our lifetime, it's been phenomenal. So here's some data that shows the life expectancy in India of the Indian population over the last 200 years. Now that life expectancy has increased. Medicine is not the only reason, but it is a key contributing factor. And I think it's amazing if you think of the last 70 years to think that many of your parents, many of your grandparents sitting in this room during their lifetime have seen the life expectancy of their children, all of you, and their grandchildren double. That's a phenomenal impact. So we have a duty to carry on the great work of previous generations. We've got to catch the baton in that relay race, and we've got to go and try and break all records that they've broken. So that's the good side, that's the upside. On the flip side, we have some challenges. So we have rising healthcare costs. The graph on your left-hand side shows the proportion of healthcare spend versus GDP for the US. And you can see that's exponentially growing year on year. That is not sustainable. At the same time, on the right-hand side, you can see pharma companies are having declining return on investment. And so you can read several papers on this, but if you look at the cost of developing a drug over the last 10 to 12 years, it's grown somewhere between $1 billion and $3.2 billion. You'll read the reports on Google, you might see 3 billion, 3.2, 2.9, but it's within that range, and that's not sustainable. Also, we operate in an industry that is a incredibly high failure rate. We know that very few of the molecules that actually make it to the marketplace. So we must innovate as an organization. We must innovate because we must carry on the great work of previous generations, and we must innovate to create a sustainable model that allows us to do it in the future. Now, statistical programming, as I said, is a small part of that ecosystem. So we have to play our part. And senior management have got to look at it holistically and decide how do we innovate across the chain. But within statistical programming, I wanted to talk about the past and the present. Okay? So here I've listed 5 innovations, and some of the audience might be thinking 2 things. The first thing you might be thinking is, well, there's more innovations than that have occurred. And the second thing you might be thinking is, well, these aren't really disruptive, they're not innovations. So to answer the first question, I would say, yeah, there probably is more innovations, but I selected 5 because 5 is a nice number, and also because these are the 5 that have impacted me most in my career. And whilst you're saying some of these things are not major innovations or disruptions, at the time they were implemented, they were pretty significant and pretty emotive for individuals. So we've got different sourcing models, implementing standards, leveraging technology, upskilling our associates, and also footprint optimization. So different sourcing models, I'm not going to talk about it too much. I know there's a distinguished panel tomorrow doing an outsourcing session. I've got a friend here over from Roche in the UK. He's on that panel. Please feel free to ask him a really difficult question. And if you want to brainstorm on a difficult question, happy to do that at the bar with some of you tonight. But for different sourcing models, I think it's really important to maybe think about how do we innovate moving forward, okay? How do we disrupt the sort of the invoice or the pricing model? Can we move to a more outcome-based, value-based model? And as I said, it feels normal today, but the topic tomorrow is about outsourcing in India. But when I was in Pfizer in the mid-2000s, 2006, 2007, moving to India was a hugely big deal at that time. Okay, implementing standards is the second one, and I talk about CDISC there, but there are other standards that exist, but primarily CDISC. And I think a lot of pharma companies and CROs started taking it really seriously around 2008, 2009, 2010. Some might have been earlier, some might have been later. The main beneficiary there, I think, has been the regulator. Because for the regulator, what it means is they've got a familiarization around the look and feel of the data that they receive. So that helps accelerate the review process, it helps create a more robust review process. But actually, I think for pharma companies, we've seen and CROs and biotechs, we've seen varying degrees of success. Some have been really successful at implementing and they've derived leaner standards and leaner number of volume of inputs, and some have been unsuccessful. Leveraging technology is another area where we've innovated in the past. So, you talk about off-the-shelf packages, custom packages, you talk about homegrown stats computing environments. We've also innovated, even today we're looking at high-performance computing environments, grid technologies, in ConSPIC looking to multi-thread, parallel processing. And also in the software space, we're moving towards different languages, R, Python. So in Novartis right now, we're going forward only hiring programmers with R skills, and Roche are doing the same, and other pharma companies are doing the same. We've also been able to develop and create more robust programming practices, software development lifecycle adherence, generic coding, dynamic coding. A lot of these things have developed over the years. And I think in that leveraging technology space, we've always seen it as a competitive intelligence advantage. Okay? And I want you to remember that because I'll come to it later on. I don't believe anymore it's a competitive intelligence advantage. We need to change the paradigm there. The fourth one is around upskilling associates. So yeah, I talked about becoming multilingual and using different languages. We'll come to that later. But it's also about developing interpersonal skills, soft skills. I talked about that, why the job is great, and you sit on a cross-functional clinical trial team, or you're on a project team leading a submission. You get to interact with different functions. You get to interact with data managers, statisticians, medical writers, clinicians, trial operations, procurement. And it's really, really important that you can bring yourself to that table and be an equal participant, that you can negotiate, that you can influence, that you can bring scientific rigor that sits within your profession and domain. And the last one is footprint optimization. So there's very much different definitions of this here. The way I define it is taking resources from one area, whether that's one site or multiple sites, and harmonizing and consolidating them and moving them to another area. And again, I apologize, I'm going to reference Novartis just because I've got the data and I can speak to that case study, but in Novartis we have gone through a significant footprint optimization. And the reason why I share that is it's very pertinent to this population in India. But we've got an organization called data operations. So statistical programming sits within data operations, alongside data management, database development, and some other smaller and equally important enabling functions. And what we did is we moved all of our resources practically to India. So we downsized US, we downsized Switzerland, and we've now got 87% of our data operations staff based out of India. And the other 13% aren't people sitting and leaders and managers and delegators. They're just there because we have local requirements in Japan or China, for example. So all the leadership, apart from me actually, sits in India. And so what we've seen during that time frame is we've been able to increase productivity. And so I say that because the model works here. I think there's sometimes negativity around that. And the second thing is we've been able to actually take annually for the last 2 years over $50 million savings for Novartis and pump it back into research. And we're expecting that 50 million annual saving to increase over the next few years. Okay, so that's the past and that's the present. Let's talk a little bit about the future. So I believe there are going to be three factors that will drive the future disruption and innovations in our space. And again, some of you in the audience will think of other factors, and I'm fine with that. But I believe these three are the most critical and most fundamental to changing that. The first one is the regulatory environment. The second one is the data. And the third one is the technology. Okay? So let's start with the first one, which is the regulatory landscape or the regulatory environment. And in order to do that, I'm kind of going to go back to the future. So I'm going to talk about March 2014, where I was reading this book called Bad Pharma. Okay? And I can see some of you nodding your heads, so you've perhaps read this book already. And for those who haven't, I advise you to read it. It's a really stimulating and interesting read. And it certainly made me think, because it talks about some of the practices and some of the principles that happen within the pharmaceutical industry. It questions them, and it challenges those practices. And it's written by Dr. Ben Goldacre. He's also wrote a book called Bad Science, which I've been meaning to read for quite some time, but I've not got around to it yet, but apparently it's an even better book by all accounts. But this book got me thinking about my role, about statistical programming, about biometrics at large, and the role we play in the drug development process. And I had a sort of a dichotomy, because one part of me was really comfortable, but the other part of me was actually quite uncomfortable. And so what I was uncomfortable with is, he was questioning, is it right that a pharmaceutical organization with a multi-$100 billion asset, quite often a multi-billion dollar asset at stake, gets to define their analysis, generate that analysis, infer conclusions from the analysis, and submit that with a proposal to say you should approve this to an agency. It doesn't feel right, okay? But on the other hand, I was comfortable because we're highly regulated. We're the most regulated industry on the planet. So that was the comfort level. So then, less than a year later, I was over in Shanghai and I was presenting on a different topic. I was presenting about the role, the importance of a relationship between a programmer and a statistician. And my last slide, I sort of left just as a food for thought, a teaser, let's think about the future. So there's probably some buzzwords in there like data warehousing or whatever, but I badly circled in blue there, you see this thing called plug and play. So at that time I really believed we were going to move towards a world where we take the data, we provide it, just the data, the agencies plug it in and they play with it, they generate their own tables, figures and listings, and they would infer their own conclusion. And I've been banging on about that for a couple of years, and thankfully I'm stopping to question my sanity, because this year the FDA commissioner in January or February tweeted and also discussed at the JP Morgan Health Conference that they're setting up a new department. That new department is called the Office of Drug Evaluation Sciences. It might have changed its name since actually. But essentially it's a rather large group of data scientists, and their medium-term goal is to access pharma data from the cloud, and they themselves will generate the analysis. So I don't think that's going to disrupt the model too much for statistical programmers in the room. We will still need to do our analysis. We will need to counter whatever they infer. We might need to augment it, or we might need to point them in different directions. But that's a significant change in the landscape that we see going forward. There's one other initiative that's ongoing right now called Real-Time Oncology Review. I believe that Merck were the pharmaceutical company that first piloted it, and we were the pharmaceutical company that were second to pilot it, but first to get an approval through it for an SNDA, which is a supplementary new drug application. And what that is, and actually I think Srinivas is in the audience today, who was the project programmer in this space for an RTOR project that we're doing. And I'm sure he'd be delighted to take any questions after the event. But But what happens is we submit data on an ongoing basis to the FDA, even before the submission. And they're building familiarity, understanding the data, sending back questions real time. And then when we do the final submission, they've got huge familiarity and they've only a few more questions to answer. And it results in a quicker approval. And we've seen that. So we are moving towards this more type of a dynamic landscape. Okay, the second factor is the data. And we all work with data, that's our job. But I think there's different types of data, and that those different types of data that we're going to be using more and more moving forward are going to present new opportunities and new challenges. So we've got sort of 4 verticals here. So RCTD stands for randomized clinical trial data. RWE is real world evidence, EHR is electronic health records, omics is data related to phenomics, genomics data, images is straightforward, it's images, and then we've got digital data. And I think most people have probably worked in that RCTD space, and perhaps quite a few in RWE. And today in Novartis and in other pharmaceutical companies, what we're seeing is we're doing a lot more submissions with a combination of those 2 data types. I can't talk about the compound yet because it's still confidential, but in Novartis next year, we're actually going to submit for a new indication just based on RWE data alone. So we're already discussing the challenges around that. The data's clean, it's unstructured, it's in different formats across different sites. How do we deliver a GXP submission under those type of challenges? And images, if we look at images, you know, I remember being at Roche and I was a project programmer on a rheumatoid arthritis compound, which is called ocrelizumab. I think Roche has since released it for multiple sclerosis. And we had X-ray data. And those images would sit in a reading center, and there would be an adjudication process, and you'd just get the readout of the parameters. What we're doing in Novartis today is we're actually bringing those images in-house, which creates challenges around scale and volume data storage, and using AI to read those images, which are more accurate, and then bringing that data into our systems. And in fact, Novartis has got a project called Data 42 right now, which is a multi-$100 million project, which is about bringing all of this data together and creating the biggest clinical data warehouse in the world, and using that to leverage new insights and pathways and discoveries moving forward. And the final one is digital data. So digital data is, it's not airy-fairy, okay? That's the first thing I want to say. It's happening today. We've got real examples of using digital endpoints in Novartis, which I can speak to, but I know it's also happening at other pharma companies. And the reason why we sort of use digital data, there's several reasons. We could talk about this for 4 hours. The reason why we use digital data, I think there's a few key reasons. One is we can measure data that we previously couldn't measure. Okay? So if you think about pain and pain management, a good indicator of pain management is sleep. Especially if you get, you know, can a patient get back to sleep after they wake up? So if someone's in severe pain, hopefully too many of you have not experienced that, but if you are in severe pain and you wake up, it's very difficult to get back to sleep. Now we've got devices that can measure the sleep pattern and understand that pain management process. That's something we couldn't do before. The other thing is about reducing patient burden. It's about being able to access data and track data continuously and stop patients having to come into a site and disrupt their daily life or daily pattern. And the other thing is it can create increased sensitivity around the measurement. Okay? So, in terms of digital data, these are some of the sensors that exist. So nothing changes when we design a study. We still have clinical questions that we need to answer. We still need to define what are the endpoints. And we still need to define, well, what's the analysis methods in order to support the endpoint that answers that clinical question. But now we're able to use some sensors to capture those endpoints. And we've got several studies in Novartis and in other pharmaceutical companies, and insurance CROs and biotechs that are using digital endpoints today. But we've got to think of some challenges around data flow. So how does this data come in? Also data volume. You know, we're looking at huge volume. At the minute, there's one endpoint in Novartis where one patient per week, one endpoint, 300 megabytes of data compressed. Okay? It's one patient, 1 week. We run studies with 8,000 patients across 52 sites, cardiovascular. So you can just imagine the scale of volume. So we really need to think about how we manage that volume. There's probably going to have to be some pre-processing algorithms to collapse that data, and then we bring that data in. So that's going to change the landscape as well. But ultimately, digital endpoints are going to become more and more popular. They're going to provide value to improve the drug development process. they're also going to help us broaden market adoption. And I know there's a pharmaceutical company out there today, I think called Gallagher, who have a primary, they've got a primary endpoint that is a digital endpoint for a pulmonary hypertension study. And they actually, FDA have approved that approach. They said, yes, go forward with that digital endpoint. Okay, so the final one is in terms of thinking about the catalysts that will change how we operate, is technology. And here I put a picture of Microsoft Outlook, because I wanted to just use this as an analogy. So email is not really a competitive component across industries. We all read and receive emails. So you don't see industries saying, I'm going to design my own email system, because that's going to give me some sort of competitive advantage. To take an off-the-shelf package, and they say, let me use that. It's not completely perfect, but it does the job of what I need to do. And I think we're going to see that starting to happen in the stats computing environment as well. And there's a few things that give me confidence around that it actually can happen, and that claim is credible. So the first one is, we've got the Innovative Medicines Institute, the IMI, which is the largest private public body looking at life sciences, which has kicked off a project to look at this problem. How do you create a stats computing environment where we can do our analytics across pharma, across regulators? That's one thing that's happening today. Another one is the MIT in the US is collaborating with the FDA, and you can Google this. The project is called UDIGS, and it's sometimes also called LEAPS. But what they're trying to do is build a project to focus on dynamic dossiers in the cloud. So how do you build something in the cloud where maybe a sponsor has access to the data, sponsor only, regulator only has access to the data, and then you've got this shared anonymized space in the middle where everyone can access the data, pharma companies, academia, to do meta-analysis and try and discover new things. So that is MIT, MII are working on this, Transcelerate, which I'm sure most of you have heard about. It's a not-for-profit cross-pharma organization. They've kicked off a new initiative looking at SCA. 3 weeks ago I was in New York with 19 other global heads of statistical programming. And what we were discussing was stats computing environments. What was really interesting in the room was there were 4 companies, all in the early stages of designing their new stats computing environments, all using the same vendor, and all paying $8 to $15 million each. And that vendor's pretty much building the same. There's subtle differences across the companies. And we're saying, well, why don't you just all throw in $3 million each or $4 million each, have them build one platform that the 4 of you can use, and then we can scale that up for industry as a whole. And actually, I got invited to Amsterdam this week, so I told you that I turned down invites, and that's another example. I was invited to Amsterdam this week for another discussion with heads of programming, data management, biometrics, to discuss this very issue as well, but with a larger focus on metadata. So this is a credible claim. I think it's happening, and it's going to take time to happen. It's very difficult to get different pharma companies to agree. And if anything now, I think the challenge we've got too many different initiatives kicking off. And we need to try and maybe bring these bodies together and say, let's just have one board focus on this. So that's going to change our landscape moving forward as well. So how do we prepare ourselves for the future then? And I guess the message from me right now is don't worry. Job's not going to change tomorrow. It's not going to change next month. It's not going to change in 6 months' time. But it is going to change in the future. And so don't worry, but you should act. And so this is Amara's law, and it talks about human expectation of technology impact versus the actual impact of technology. And Bill Gates talks about a short-term and a long-term impact. So short-term he describes as 2 years, and long-term he describes as 10 years. So what he says is that we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in 2 years' time, and as a result of that, we underestimate the impact of technology in 10 years' time. I think for our job, our profession, we can shift that curve line to the right-hand side slightly. I think short-term would be 2 to 5 years, and long-term would be 10 to 15 years. And the reason why I say that is because we're highly regulated, and it's very difficult to have an agile implementation model within that environment. So look at Tesla, for example. Tesla can release a car. It's not perfect. They update the software practically every day, and they're failing forward all the time. It's very difficult for us to fail forward because we have certain criteria to meet at the absolute outset. So prepare yourselves. Things are going to change. Okay, so in terms of the future and how we prepare ourselves, I wanted to maybe just leave you with some ideas for leaders. So I describe leaders as managers of managers of managers, or managers of managers. Managers who have got direct reports, but they don't manage managers. And colleagues, the most important people of all, the foot soldiers that do the work. So for leaders, it's really important to think about, to have an open-minded mindset, that open source concept. And I use the words collaborate and conquer here, and not divide and conquer. It's about collaborating and it's about conquering. I think we need to take a step back and realize that competitive intelligence is not really in that clinical trials operation space. And we have a duty in whether it's Novartis or Pfizer or Roche or IQVIA or wherever, we're able to innovate the process to try and share that practice with the broader industry so we can bring drugs to the market quicker for the patients who desperately need them. So leaders need to have that open mindset. I think managers need to have an enabling mindset, okay? And I call that selfless leadership or servant leadership. You know, you are there to serve your people, they are not there to serve you. It's really, really important to have that concept, I think, as we move forward in this model. And I think for the managers, I think I would say really focus on the day-to-day simple activities that are occurring today, and simple managers, which is maybe a little controversial, but I wanted to be transparent about it. I actually think that we're in a model today where earning potential generally increases with management. That's kind of the model. If you do a correlation or a proc-core in that, that's programming terms. I think we're going to see that disruptive change moving forward. Like today, I know of people in Novartis who earn more than their manager because it's a demand and supply in the marketplace thing. This data engineering skill set is going to become really, really important. So I think managers need to be comfortable with that concept as well. That, you know, in the next 2 to 4 years, you'll start to see more and more associates with specialist skills perhaps earn more money than you are. And that's already happening in Switzerland, it's already happening in Europe, it's already happening in the US. We actually have examples of it happening in Hyderabad in India as well. Not in stats programming, but in this sort of data science field. And the last thing is for the most important people, the foot soldiers, the people who actually do the work, and that is the growth mindset. Really, really important, not in a fixed mindset, but a growth mindset. And I was delighted to hear Korak say that we've got students here. And are the students in the room now, or are they just coming to the poster set? So students, can you put your hands up, just to get an idea? Okay. So, a message to you. When you come into the corporate world, it's really, really important to not let that corporate environment suck away the curiosity and the fearlessness you have about learning. Because when you're at university, if you think back to all of us at university, every day you walked into a lecture with something new, and you were never scared about learning that. And that's something I see now when I travel different sites in Novartis. I was in Shanghai 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, and I met with some of the new students. And their energy and their passion to just learn and continue that learning is phenomenal. And actually it inspired me and motivated me. So that growth mindset is super, super important. And the term I use here is become a learnatic. Not a lunatic, but a learnatic. I'm really, really passionate about learning. And I remember one student made a quote to me. The student said, while she was at university, and she's come from MIT, that I quoted earlier, and she was saying, while she was at university, she used to think of herself from a learning capacity as a stream. And that stream became bigger and bigger as she developed in her university, progressed, and now she's in industry, that stream needs to become bigger. So she sees her learning growth actually getting broader and deeper as her career progresses. And that's a great, great mindset to have. I have no doubt she'll go on and do amazing things in the industry and the organization. Okay, that's it, I believe. Oh, yeah, I just started off by saying that, you know, I think the role of a statistical programmer in healthcare is cool. I think it's a great job. We should be proud of that job. I think with all the things we're seeing in the future, all these technology changes, different data sources, the regulatory landscape, the speed of digital, it's going to go from cool to super cool. So this is just a legal disclaimer. I'm not going to read it out. I'll let you read it. It's just standard process. I apologize for that. And happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Thank you, James. So, anybody questions? First question of the conference.